Happy Thursday. Today is Thursday, the 27th of August, 2020, and today's daily Bible readings come to us from Psalm 105, 1 through 6, and then 23 through 26, and verse 45, just oddly enough. Exodus 2, 23 through 24, Ephesians 5, 1 through 6, or you could have read Psalm 26, 1 through 8, Jeremiah 14, 13 through 18, and then end up again with Ephesians. But today I want to talk about covenant, so I'm going to be dealing with the passage from Exodus. And, well, why is covenant important? Well, it's going to take me a while to get there, but just be patient. The thing that caught my eye, I guess, or ears, however you want to say it, with this text today is where it just says that God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, why is that important? Well, the text says, when the children of Israel cried out to God, that he responded because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It doesn't, let me put it this way. None of the people living in Egypt at that time, none of the people that God is responding to knew or were around even when Jacob died. Right? This is generations removed from Joseph and Jacob and that time period. But when God hears their cry, he remembers his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He remembers that he made promises to them, to their forefathers, not because he made promises directly with the people involved here now in Exodus 22, 23, and 24, but because he made promises to their forefathers. Even generations removed from Jacob, God remembers his covenant with Jacob and Abraham and Isaac. Why? Well, there's a difference between I hear people talk about covenant and contract, and they use them interchangeably. And people like alumni of the Wesley, if they've ever listened to me when they were here, know that I talk about this quite a bit. But it's something that has popped into my mind again lately, and I was glad that this text popped up. But covenant is not the same as contract, right? So, and this is a quote by a guy named Elazar, and he says that a covenant is much more than a contract because it involves a pledge of loyalty and morally grounded obligation beyond that demanded for mutual advantage, often involving the development of community among partners. So, what does that mean? In other words, it means that God makes covenants with people, not contracts. If he did just make contracts with people, every one of us would be in breach of contract, and he would be free of us forever. But that's not the way covenants work. Covenant, if I make a covenant with you, it means that I'm morally responsible for your good, even if you completely turn your back on me. I still have a moral obligation to you. That's the way covenants work, and that's the way God's covenants work. In making covenants with us, right, with humanity, he calls us into community with him. That's the other part that Elazar was talking about. Covenants build community. Contracts don't really. Contracts pull people together so they can get mutual benefit from a relationship for a specific time, but then when that mutual benefit is gone, when that end is over with and done with, or if it doesn't come about, they just don't have to deal with each other anymore. If you make a covenant with somebody, it's not that simple. So God takes on responsibility and works for our good, regardless of how we behave. And so that may mean he has to teach us every once in a while. That doesn't mean he's just going to turn a blind eye to the things that we do that go against the promises of the covenant, because in the covenant we make promises too. So he may have to teach us a lesson every now and then, and that may feel very much like he's not upholding his covenant. But it means that he will never completely turn his back. He won't just walk away from us forever and eternity. Well, he just won't walk away from us without, just because he has no responsibility for us anymore. So the important thing is remembering your covenant with God, because he sure as shooting remembers his covenant with you. If he was willing to look back generations and uphold the covenant, the promise that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he will be faithful to maintain the covenant that you have with him. And the thing is, too, remember, when God makes covenant with his people, he calls them into community, not just with him, but with everyone else, with the rest of his creation, with the other people that he's created, right? So, in your relationships, if you consider yourself to be a beneficiary of this covenant with God, that means your relationships are impacted by that too. So definitely, of course, it's easy for people to understand that the covenant with God impacts how they maintain their relationships with the people close to them. So, for instance, if you're a person who thinks that in the future you want to be married, something you need to understand now is that marriage, you are making a covenant. And in the church, you are making a covenant in the eyes of God. There's three people involved: you, your spouse, and God, when you make that covenant. Sometimes I worry when I do ceremonies that the people that I'm marrying together don't really understand that very much, and they tend to think of marriage as just a contract. And so if the person doesn't hold up their obligations in the contract, then they're free to do whatever. But that's not what marriage is about. Marriage is a covenant, which you should just start thinking about it that way now. And you're in a covenant with your family. You're in a covenant with your friends. Your covenant with God should dictate how you deal with them. And then, even beyond that, as members of society, your covenant relationship with God determines how you live among your neighbors or strangers, however you want to put it. Christ preferred neighbors. But nothing they've done or left undone, or who they're from, or where they're from, or what they look like, what they smell like, allows us to void that covenant. And I'll be honest, there are times where you really wish you could, but you can't do it, because if you are going to maintain covenant with God, you've got to maintain the responsibilities of covenant with all of his children. So, you may disagree with me on this. I'm sorry, you're not really disagreeing with me so much. This is pretty much the thought of the church on this. There's a reason that Christ called us together under the blood of the new covenant. In Christ we are all called into that covenant with the same God, who heard the cries of Israel and remembered his covenant with people that they never knew, right? How far removed are you from Christ? I guarantee you are farther removed from Christ and that covenant in time than the children of Israel were from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And yet God still maintains and still remembers that covenant through Christ that you are a beneficiary of. So go out and live your life today as a person of covenant. And we'll see you tomorrow. Actually, Stuart Huggins will see you tomorrow. Have a good day. Boop.